Welcome to the Business Desk, and the infrastructure conversation continues here tonight. President Ramaphosa has the tough task of telling us what the government's plan for the year is going to be. Last year, he promised that he would set up an infrastructure fund to help fund private sector and the public sector projects to boost the economy. To help me go through all of this is Neresh Pather, President of Consulting Engineers of South Africa. And back now is also Campbell, who was in the package earlier. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Your expectations out of the sauna on Thursday?
Certainly looking forward to positive feedback from the President in terms of the new cabinet and his plans in terms of two things that are of interest to us is the policy committee that he's set up in the presidency. I think a positive view in terms of policies governing infrastructure is what our sector is looking for.
Is it correct, Chris, to say that your industry is really rubbing the hands with glee here, seeing all these opportunities that may come? Because Mr. Ramaphosa has given an indication that the government is going to drive this infrastructure drive really to boost the economy. There are lots of opportunities for you.
Well, I think maybe glee may not be an appropriate kind of expression. I think it's more a willingness and a passion to want to make that difference. And there are huge knock-on effects. We can't have a situation where young graduates come out of university and our companies are unable to employ them simply because we do not have enough infrastructure projects on the go.
Okay. But it's really proven the role infrastructure investment can really help an economy that is struggling like ours. So what do you think in the short term really Mr. Ramaphosa needs to do with very specific ideas from you gentlemen?
I think, Sam, the picture starts with consulting engineering. We are the backbone in terms of all of the planning and the feasibility for large-scale infrastructure. I think we mustn't lose sight of the fact that large infrastructure projects employ thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. And one of the big issues we have from a country point of view, aside from the demand for infrastructure, is being able to employ people. If the planning is right, it's done consistently and properly, we believe that that's the building blocks to growing our economy.
What about the financing side? What are you picking up from your colleagues in the private finance industry?
Well, look, for the most part, we find that there is an appetite for the private sector to want to finance some of these projects because there is a realization that not all of the funding exists within government. What really needs to happen now is that certainty, policy certainty and trust, especially when we come to our application of procurement regulations and whether we're getting the best value for money with some of the current processes that we have adopted.
Okay. But do you think the clarity issue is policy certainty is lacking? With Ramaphosa, he's been around for longer than a year.
I don't think it's, in terms of that, I don't think it's so much policy uncertainty. I think it's procurement consistency and the application of our policies. From a South African point of view, our legislation is clear and uncomplicated. Our problem lies in the execution. Infrastructure is very technical, and I think the custodians of infrastructure rest in technical hands. I'm hoping that the President, in the entire cleanup campaign of the SOEs and all of those things, will get good, technically skilled people in decision-making positions.
Okay. Do you guys feel that you are inside the room when these discussions are taking place? I mean, if you look at SAA, there's a lot of banks and bankers around that, and talking about saving Eskom. The banks and bankers will be the first people. Are you guys part of this, the greater conversations about really cranking up the economy?
Well, I think with the context of the earlier slot that you had, certainly a lot more can be done. It's really just unfortunate that we haven't quite gotten over that skepticism, that lack of trust. And we really believe that from the 2010 debacle, we should be beyond that by now.
Sorry, when you talk about the skepticism, is it public skepticism? Is this how the negative response from the public? The public doesn't trust your industry because of the terrible things that came out?
But I think there isn't a comprehensive enough understanding of the various players in the industry. And so everybody gets tarred with the same brush. You had construction companies. We specifically look after the interests of consulting engineering companies who do the upfront work, way ahead of the delivery that has to take place.
Okay. Sam, if I could just also add, I mean, you've had the feature on Trillion and the issue of consultants.
Yeah.
I think it's a very distinct distinction that we must draw in terms of consulting engineering versus consultants.
Yeah.
And our industry represents a technical profession in terms of engineering infrastructure. And that's what our organization stands for. So it is a distinction that we would like to draw.
Okay. It really fascinates me when I look at the New Dawn and how it takes off versus the Zuma years and how Zuma came on in 2009. You may remember that Ibrahim Patel put together an infrastructure plan. The figure was 747 billion rands to be spent on capital projects. I mean, I couldn't really find the money at all the budget books and documents. Did you ever get a sense that the government could put together a plan like that and actually give us a greater efficiency around these things? And the lessons from that, looking at now.
So, I think there's no shortage of money. It's really the application of those budgets. I mean, too often we see departments from a grassroots level return budgets unspent. And that's why we believe that there needs to be greater emphasis on the pipeline of projects and planning way in advance of just-in-time, just-in-sequence type projects. So it's got to be done in advance so that we can feed and continuously feed the construction sector in terms of building.
Okay. Are we ever going to see in South Africa the development of the concept of the private sector financing of public infrastructure? It's taking a strong lead in that.
Well, look, there are already examples of that. I mean, the Gautrain, close to where we are, and elsewhere in the country. So the partnership between government and the private sector in terms of funding and financing has always been there. We could probably do a lot more of that, and I think we're really in a situation where we're going to need to, because the fact of the matter is that if we don't start stimulating our own economy and investing in our own economy, we are not that easily going to get your foreign investors to want to invest in South Africa.
Okay. So I heard in the clip that you were for South Africa to be using local companies and buy local and it's cheaper. I mean, I don't buy that. I mean, you'd find a company that has got experience in building big-scale projects in Europe, China, India. They have expertise and greater economies of scope and scale, and that makes it cheaper in some cases. Surely you'd agree with that?
Look, I think there needs to be a happy balance between your local capacity and your local capability. In fact, South African engineering expertise is valued across the world. What we do need to do is have that balance between the kinds of knowledge sharing that could take place by involving large multinational companies in our markets. But we have to do it in a better way than some of our neighboring countries have, so that at least our local practitioners have the skills and the knowledge to look after the infrastructure that we've developed for the next 30 to 50 years.
Okay. So what innovation are you guys seeing from your industry, besides now waiting for the government to decide what projects that must be followed, really? Is there any innovation that's really amazing from your industries?
So I think the construction industry has been far behind in terms of the digital drive. And I think we're seeing a lot of energy going into technology. We're also seeing a lot of emphasis placed on climate resilience and being able to do more with less, and being able to drive infrastructure that are resilient across all changes. So those are areas that we're seeing definite intelligence. And then the last thing I think is smart infrastructure. You know, I heard a very nice quote about public transport, and it went along the lines, a smart city is a city where rich people use public transport.
Very interesting. Neresh, certainly that's where we live it. And gentlemen, thank you so much. And it's now time for an ad break. News continues after the break.